What if the man you trusted most shattered your world with a single, brutal slap right in public while you're carrying his child? Elena stands frozen on the Beverly Wilshire rooftop, the cool Pacific breeze carrying the scent of her husband's infidelity as he embraces his mistress, then turns his fury on her. "You're nothing without me," he snarls, the crack echoing like thunder, phones capturing every humiliating second. Tears blur her vision, but inside, the pain twists into resolve, the same ache you've buried in toxic relationships, pretending everything's fine. Pregnant and alone, Elena flees to her best friend's apartment, the viral video exploding online, his family's PR machine labeling her unstable. Yet, she's been the silent watcher all along, noting every suspicious wire transfer, every whispered call. This isn't just her story, it's the one you've lived in shadows. The ivory evening gown clung to Elena's 3-month pregnant body, accentuating delicate curves that only the sharpest eyes could discern. She stepped into the grand ballroom, where light from crystal chandeliers shimmered like stars in the California night sky, reflecting off the glossy marble floor. The air buzzed with polite laughter, the clink of champagne glasses, and the sophisticated blend of high-end perfume with the scent of fresh flowers from towering decorative vases. This was the playground of the elite Silicon Valley investors, with smiles as bright as toothpaste commercials and Malibu real estate moguls bragging about ocean view villas worth enough to buy a small town. Elena flashed a perfect smile, honed through hundreds of similar events, as she greeted familiar faces. There was the Santa Monica Art Gallery owner, always spinning tales of abstract paintings with the gravitas of someone revealing cosmic secrets, and the Palo Alto tech titan, whose conversations felt like a mini TED Talk, brimming with buzzwords like disruptive innovation and synergy. But behind that polished social mask, Elena sensed a creeping tension, like the eerie background score of a horror movie steadily rising in tempo. Alexander, her husband and CEO of Harrington Enterprises, had swiftly vanished into the sea of black tuxedos and glittering gowns, leaving her alone at their assigned table. He was always like this, a whirlwind weaving through the crowd, gripping her arm just tightly enough to remind her who held control, before diving into business deals he called golden opportunities. The silent observer like Elena never missed the subtle details, the stray puzzle pieces others deemed harmless. She noticed the furtive glances of the assistant, Victoria Lang, a young woman with lustrous blonde hair, repeatedly darting her eyes toward the door leading to the rooftop terrace. Victoria lifted her glass with a faintly trembling hand, as if trying to conceal a secret too heavy to hold. Elena smiled inwardly. How ironic, she thought, that in a place where everyone pretended to be flawless, even a shaky hand could star in a Hollywood comedy script. Like, oops, I just spilled $1 million secret. But deeper down, those observations tightened her chest. Conversations around the table seemed to hush as she approached, replaced by forced smiles and abrupt pivots to LA's sunny weather, a subtle dodge, but to Elena, it rang like an alarm bell. The warm voice of her father, Miguel, echoed from distant memories, advice whispered during quiet Texas afternoons. Just breathe, my love, and observe. The truth always slips through the smallest cracks. Elena placed a protective hand on her belly, feeling the gentle stir of the life growing inside, a quiet source of strength, reminding her she was no longer alone. A tense silence enveloped the air, like the morning fog in Malibu, obscuring the view but unable to hide the true outlines forever. 1 hour passed, then 2, and Alexander remained absent from their table, though Elena caught glimpses of him in the crowd, always moving toward the terrace with an oddly focused expression. Her stomach twisted, not from hunger or the strain of high heels, but from an instinct that had carried her through years as the perfect Mrs. Harrington, always watching from the wings. Finally, she followed that instinct. The path to the rooftop led her past tables laden with LA's finest delicacies, Russian caviar, sushi from a top Japanese chef, but the idle chatter and laughter around her seemed to dissolve with each step. Through floor-to-ceiling glass windows, the Los Angeles skyline sparkled with neon lights from the Hollywood Hills, a breathtaking scene now mocking the growing unease in her heart. She heard them before she saw them. Alexander's distinctive laugh mingling with a feminine giggle, making her hand tremble as she pushed open the glass door. The cool Pacific breeze swept in, carrying the sweet scent of orchids from the hotel gardens, a fragrance that would forever etch this moment into her memory. Under the shadow of a decorative trellis, her husband stood, his arms wrapped tightly around Victoria in her fiery red dress, their familiar intimacy making Elena's world tilt on its axis. The cool night breeze from the Pacific swept in like a deceitful whisper, carrying the sweet scent of orchids from the Beverly Wilshire Hotel's gardens, but to Elena, it was only the smell of betrayal, eternal and inescapable, a fragrance that would haunt her like the Hollywood noir film she once watched, where the protagonist always uncovered the truth in the least expected places. Under the romantic shadow of a decorative trellis, Alexander stood, his arms wrapped tightly around Victoria Lang in a fiery red dress, as vivid as a neon warning sign from Sunset Strip. Victoria, the young financial analyst he hired 3 months ago, who once brought coffee to their Beverly Hills mansion with a smile so fake Elena had thought, with a touch of irony, it could star in a toothpaste commercial flawless, yet full of chemicals. Now, that intimacy was laid bare, a familiar gesture that made Elena's blood boil, as if her heart were running a marathon with no finish line. Elena stood frozen at the threshold, the sea breeze threading through her hair, carrying a chill that seeped into her skin. But the real cold came from deep within the shattering of a world she had carefully built over 5 years of marriage. Alexander turned slowly, his face showing no surprise or shame, only a flicker of annoyance, as if interrupted during a crucial business meeting. Victoria stepped back, but her hand lingered on his arm, a subtle gesture of possession that made Elena feel like she was watching a dark comedy where the side character mistakenly thought she was the star. Elena stepped forward, her voice steadier than she expected, drawing strength from the unborn child stirring gently in her womb, a silent reminder that she was no longer fighting alone. The tension in the air was thick, sliceable with a knife, and Elena felt her heartbeat pounding chaotically, mingling with the distant crash of waves from Malibu shore. Her question hung in the air, drawing a small crowd near the terrace door, curious guests with phones at the ready, the click of recordings shattering the silence of the night like stones tossed into a still lake. Alexander's perfect mask cracked, his voice carrying the familiar dangerous calm, now laced with a simmering rage beneath. He stepped toward her, towering over Elena's petite frame, his words spilling out like sharp blades. Victoria understood what a man in his position needed: unquestioning support, not some martyr playing the victim, and she wasn't the first to provide it. Those words struck like invisible punches, prompting Elena to instinctively cradle her belly, shielding the innocent life from the storm of toxic venom. It was the darkest kind of humor in the heart of LA's elite, where people paid for therapy to avoid drama. The drama exploded right before their eyes. Then came the slap, sudden and unannounced, the crack of his palm against Elena's cheek echoing across the terrace, followed by gasps of shock from the crowd and the frantic clicking of more phones. Elena staggered back, her hand flying to her face, as tears blurred her vision, the stinging pain spreading not just across her skin but deep into her soul. Alexander growled, his composure fully shattered, his voice dripping with contempt. Always pushing, always prying. She was nothing without him, nothing at all. Under the Los Angeles sky, twinkling with artificial stars from the Hollywood hills, with dozens of witnesses and phones capturing the public humiliation, something inside Elena Ramirez changed forever. Years of being the silent wife, observing from the sidelines, crystallized into iron resolve, a quiet strength Alexander had never noticed. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her steps steady despite trembling legs, leaving the terrace before the tears truly fell. With shaking fingers, she pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number, her voice choked. She needed her parents in Los Angeles now. That moment, under the glow of the city that never sleeps, marked the start of a transformation from victim to the one who would lead the storm. The harsh morning light of Los Angeles streamed through the window of the small West Hollywood apartment where Elena Ramirez sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the thin silk pajamas from the night before, like the protagonist in a melancholic indie film that American audiences love to watch on quiet weekend evenings. Her cheeks still stung from the public slap on the Beverly Wilshire rooftop, A wound not just on her skin but etched deep into her soul, as if Hollywood itself had decided to film her drama without a script. Elena's phone buzzed incessantly, its screen lighting up with social media notifications, messages from her mother-in-law, Evelyn Harrington, and blazing headlines. Harrington scandal. CEO slaps pregnant wife. The video of the incident had gone viral overnight, thrusting her into the eye of a media storm, while Harrington Enterprises' stock plummeted like a blockbuster panned by critics. Elena stared at the screen, feeling as though the whole world was watching her crumble, and with a bitter irony, she thought how amusing, in a city where people pay for drama on the screen. Her real-life drama was free and viral. Lydia Thompson, her best friend from USC college days, stepped in with a steaming cup of chamomile tea, its gentle fragrance a feeble attempt to soothe the chaos. Lydia, with her tousled hair and the laid-back style of a West Hollywood artist, looked at Elena with eyes both worried and resolute. She set the tea down, her hand gently brushing Elena's shoulder, as if to say this tiny apartment was a safe haven amid the storm. Elena took a deep breath, her fingers unconsciously grazing her cheek, where Alexander's slap still left a stinging sensation. She whispered, her voice choked, that her parents, Miguel and Sofia Ramirez, were on their way from Texas to LAX, but her heart weighed heavy with an unspoken secret. They didn't yet know about the baby she carried. Just the thought of revealing the truth made her tremble, as if standing before a Hollywood camera without knowing her lines. When Miguel and Sofia entered the apartment, Miguel's tall, weathered frame and Sofia's familiar floral sweater brought the warmth of Texas Christmases. Sofia's arms wrapped tightly around Elena, her lavender scent like a sedative, pulling her back to childhood days when every problem could be solved with a hug. Elena choked up, tears finally spilling as she confessed about the unborn child. Sofia held her tighter, and in that silent moment, she shared a profound secret. Before meeting Miguel, she had been married to a man like Alexander, charming in public, but cruel behind closed doors. Her story of years spent enduring abuse, isolated from friends and family, and her escape to Cincinnati sparked a quiet fire in Elena. Sofia, with a resolute gaze, recounted the day she stood up, packed her bags, and reclaimed herself a story not on Netflix, but more inspiring than any film. That revelation pierced the fog in Elena's mind like a beam of light, transforming her silent observation into a resolve to act. She sat with her parents on Lydia's cramped sofa, the morning light illuminating the meticulous list she had written the night before, critical documents, external hard drives, and suspicious financial records she had secretly copied during afternoons when Alexander thought she was at yoga. How ironic, Elena thought, that while he was busy building his empire, she had inadvertently become an amateur detective, like a character in an LA edition of Law and Order. They planned to return to the Beverly Hills mansion to retrieve her belongings, Elena whispering as she pictured opening Alexander's safe. The silent observer notices everything. Miguel stood by the window, his towering figure like a shield ready to fend off any storm, while Sofia checked Lydia's tiny kitchen, brewing more tea, as if it were a familiar healing ritual. As the afternoon light faded, Elena felt a flicker of hope, fragile but unmistakable, like a studio spotlight flaring before the main scene. The documents she was about to retrieve were not just belongings, they were the keys to unlocking secrets darker than infidelity, secrets that Alexander and his family had concealed in the glamorous shadows of Hollywood. Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping, so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. In the dim glow of attorney Rebecca Klein's office in downtown Los Angeles, Elena Ramirez sat between her parents, her hand gently cradling her pregnant belly as if holding onto a fragile promise. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering skyline of downtown LA, but the glamorous view could not soothe the emotional storm swirling within her. The small room, filled with the scent of old paper and freshly brewed coffee, was an arena where Elena prepared to transform her silent observation into a sharp blade. slicing through the gilded facade of Harrington Enterprises. Rebecca, with her silver hair neatly tied back and eyes as piercing as a lawyer in a Hollywood courtroom drama, flipped through the pages of documents Elena had meticulously gathered. Financial records, external hard drives, and Victoria Lang's scrawled signatures on transfers through shell companies all painted a picture of systematic fraud, like the script of a corruption film that American audiences couldn't tear their eyes from. Elena smiled inwardly, a touch of bitter humor flickering through. She had skipped countless yoga sessions to photograph these documents, turning herself into an amateur spy in her own home, while Alexander thought she was just a harmless, pregnant housewife. Elena's silence was not passive. It was a weapon honed through months of noticing subtle signs. Alexander's evasive glances when his phone buzzed at midnight, his unusually prolonged business trips to San Francisco, and the way Victoria always appeared at the right moment with a smile so fake it could star in a cosmetics ad. On those Friday afternoons, when LA's sunlight streamed through the Beverly Hills mansion's windows, Elena had quietly snapped photos of each document, her hands trembling but her mind razor-sharp, like a character in Erin Brockovich, but without the low-cut blouse to draw attention. Now, sitting across from Rebecca, she drew strength from her unborn child, each gentle kick a reminder that she was fighting for both of them. Her father, Miguel, sat to her left, his calloused hands clenched, as if ready to smash any obstacle, while her mother, Sophia, gently stroked Elena's hand, her eyes gleaming with the resolve of someone who had survived her own marital hell and emerged stronger. An unexpected text lit up Elena's phone, interrupting her thoughts. Victoria Lang, the woman in the fiery red dress from the rooftop, sent a brief message. Offshore accounts. And a request to meet. Elena's heart clenched, memories of the public slap and Alexander's cruel confession cutting like an unhealed wound. But as she read the message, she realized a painful truth. Victoria was also a victim, ensnared in Alexander's web of manipulation, just as Elena had once been. With reluctant but resolute determination, Elena agreed to let Victoria testify in exchange for immunity, a decision that felt like signing a pact with the devil but was necessary to dismantle Alexander's empire. Rebecca, with a discreet smile like a chess grandmaster, emphasized that the baby changed everything in the prenuptial agreement, a legal ace Alexander hadn't anticipated. Elena felt a spark of hope, like a Hollywood spotlight flaring before the climactic scene. Outside, Evelyn's PR team spread rumors through tabloids, labeling Elena as unstable due to hormones, a classic LA elite tactic to smear those who dared to challenge them. Elena, gripping a cold coffee cup, smiled at the irony. How amusing, she thought, that the world saw her as weak when she held all the receipts to topple an empire. With her parents' support, she moved to a small apartment in Midtown Los Angeles, where the afternoon light was softer, carrying the scent of freshly baked bread from a nearby bakery. Elena started work at Bennett Builders, a startup led by Carol Bennett, who saw potential in her determined gaze. Miguel and Sophia stayed nearby, turning the apartment into a warm haven where the aroma of Lydia's chamomile tea and her parents' laughter wove a symphony of healing. Each night, Elena reviewed the documents, arranging them like a director prepping for the final shot, knowing the SEC was poised to deliver the decisive blow. The blazing sunlight from the SEC office in San Francisco streamed through towering glass windows, illuminating every line of text on Elena Ramirez's documents, as if California's sunshine itself were exposing the dark secrets of Harrington Enterprises. The modern room, with its white walls and the scent of printer ink from the photocopier, felt like a Hollywood soundstage where the climactic scene was being staged, but this time there was no scripted pretense. Investigator Robert Chen, lean but with eyes as sharp as a detective in a noir film, flipped through the pages Elena had painstakingly collected, his fingers pausing at notes about the Harrington Charity Fund. Elena sat across from him, her hand resting lightly on her pregnant belly, feeling the strong kicks of her child like a silent cheer, while memories of the slap on the Beverly Wilshire rooftop stung like a recurring scene in her mind. She had turned her silent observation into a razor-sharp weapon, and now it was aimed directly at the heart of Alexander Harrington's empire. Those documents were more than just papers. They were pieces of a sophisticated money laundering scheme where the Harrington Charity Fund, with its lavish galas at five-star hotels, served as a front to funnel millions into offshore accounts. Elena recalled the events she had attended, where wealthy guests clapped for philanthropic spirit while donated funds vanished like smoke on Hollywood Boulevard. How ironic, she thought, that all of Los Angeles saw her as just a pregnant wife on the sidelines while she was documenting every detail like a screenwriter crafting the finale of a hit drama series. Robert Chen, with quiet admiration, confirmed her evidence was airtight, from suspicious transactions to Victoria Lang's signatures, the woman who once stood in Alexander's arms on the rooftop. Each line of text was a bullet, poised to bring down the empire that Alexander and his mother, Evelyn, had built on a foundation of lies. Outside, at Harrington Enterprises headquarters in downtown LA, the company's stock plummeted like a disaster movie no one wanted to watch, with panicked investors pulling out funds. Evelyn, in an expensive business suit, held a press conference in front of the gleaming glass building, trying to control the damage with a confident smile but eyes betraying raw panic. She accused Elena of being a vengeful wife acting out over personal issues, but an LA Times reporter, microphone raised high, exposed the truth. Elena was the whistleblower, backed by undeniable evidence. In that moment, Victoria Lang, now an SEC witness, revealed the final detail that shattered everything. Evelyn, not Alexander, was the mastermind behind the shady transactions, willing to sacrifice her son to protect her empire. With bitter irony, Elena thought the entire Harrington family had cast themselves as the villains in a movie they thought they starred in. Meanwhile, Alexander, facing the threat of prison, chose the least painful path, testifying against his mother for leniency. He signed the divorce agreement in a San Francisco law office, granting Elena full custody and a fair share of assets, his eyes vacant, as if his starring role had been cut from the script. Elena, from her new office at Bennett Builders in Midtown Los Angeles, watched the news on her laptop screen, feeling her baby kick hard as if applauding her mother's victory. That evening, in the small apartment her parents had rented nearby, the scent of Sophia's chamomile tea and Miguel's warm laughter enveloped her like a comforting blanket. Elena gazed out the window, where LA's lights twinkled like stars, and felt a rare sense of peace. She hadn't sought destruction, only to let the truth shine, like a stage spotlight illuminating every dark corner. Evelyn received a 15-year sentence, her face on the news resembling a dethroned queen, while Alexander vanished somewhere on the West Coast, perhaps trying to rewrite his story in a rundown bar. Elena, her hand resting on her belly, knew her journey wasn't over. The gentle morning sunlight slipped through the nursery's curtains in the Midtown Los Angeles apartment, bathing the room in a warm golden hue, as if Hollywood itself were flipping on the stage lights for the final scene of an inspiring film. Elena Ramirez, 9 months pregnant, sat on an oak rocking chair, her hands softly stroking her belly, feeling the strong movements of her child like a promise of a brighter future. She named her daughter Aurora Dawn, a name that symbolized a new beginning, like light chasing away the darkness of the days when she was the silent wife in the Beverly Hills mansion. The small room, with the scent of fresh paint and the woody aroma from the handcrafted crib her father, Miguel, had meticulously built, stood as a symbol of a life Elena had built with her own hands, no longer reliant on the false glamour of Alexander Harrington. How ironic, she thought, that all of Los Angeles once saw her as a victim on the news, and now she was rewriting her own script, like a Hollywood producer crafting a happy ending. Each day, Elena stepped out of the apartment with newfound confidence, like a protagonist entering the final shot of an Oprah-produced film. She joined the board of a women's shelter in downtown LA, where pale gray walls and the aroma of coffee blended to create a healing space for those who, like her mother Sophia, had endured abuse. Elena shared her story from the public slap on the rooftop to her journey of turning silent observation into a powerful voice, with women whose eyes held both fear and a yearning for hope. Each story she told was a brick in a bridge, helping them find their voices, and each responding smile was a small victory, like quiet applause in an empty movie theater. Her resilience, forged through long nights reviewing documents and days battling Evelyn's PR team, now became a torch lighting the way for others. At Bennett Builders, Elena rose to become Chief Operating Officer, a role she once thought was reserved for men like Alexander in the glittering boardrooms of downtown LA. Carol Bennett, the company's founder, saw in Elena not just talent but a steadfast flame, like the light from a lighthouse guiding through a storm. How ironic, Elena thought, that she was once called unstable due to hormones, yet now she managed construction projects with the precision of a Hollywood director filming an action scene. An unexpected friendship with Victoria Lang, once a shadow in her nightmare, blossomed over coffee at a small cafe near Venice Beach. Victoria, now freelancing and free from Harrington Enterprises' shadow, shared stories of Alexander's manipulation, helping Elena realize they had both been pawns in his game. Those conversations, laced with the sound of ocean waves and the salty scent of the sea, were a healing balm no script could capture. Aurora was born on a radiant morning. As LA's sunlight poured through the windows of Cedars-Sinai Hospital, her deep brown eyes sparkling like her mother's, as if carrying the light of dawn itself. Miguel and Sophia stood there, silent tears falling as they held their granddaughter, their arms a fortress shielding Elena from painful memories. A year later, Elena gazed at a family photo hung on the apartment wall, where Aurora's smile was the center of all light. The Harrington Fund, once a front for crime, was now restructured into a legitimate charity under independent oversight, like a film remade with a kinder ending. Elena, sitting beside Aurora, whispered that the silent have the strongest voice, a reminder that truth always finds a way to shine, no matter how long it's been hidden. Elena's story is a flame of inspiration, like a movie theater's lights that never dim, calling on those who are silent to stand up and let truth lead the way. If this story touches you, like, share, and subscribe to explore more journeys of turning pain into power. But dear friend, ask yourself, what flame does your silence hide, and how will you let it blaze? The bedroom door creaked open. On the silk-covered bed, her millionaire husband was entwined with a strange woman, their eyes locked in a gaze full of defiance. She stood there, her heart feeling as if it had been torn apart, her trembling hand clutching her pregnant belly. Without a single word, without a single tear, she turned away and vanished. But before leaving the house, she left behind one single thing, a USB drive. The one thing that could destroy everything he had ever built. Celia Harper had always believed that love was the one thing in life that didn't need a blueprint. She came from a small town in Kentucky, where a smile was still an accepted form of payment at the bakery, and people still believed in the power of saying grace over dinner. A gentle girl with caramel brown hair, a kind smile, and a voice as sweet as iced tea on a summer afternoon. She taught at the local elementary school, lived in a tiny rented house, cared for a chubby cat named Elvis, and believed that the best things in life came from sincerity. Until the day she met Travis Delaney. They met at an education conference in Miami. Celia had been invited to speak because she had single-handedly raised the funds to build her school's library. Travis, the conference's main sponsor, arrived late, wearing a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up and the collar open, the perfect CEO profile shot that every business magazine adored. He smiled when he saw Celia speaking about the children and their dream of reading. And Celia, for the first time in her life, felt as though she had just stepped into a story that had never been written. Travis pursued her with a kind of intelligence and patience never showy, yet never without dinner dates on yachts, first-class plane tickets, and fresh bouquets waiting at her doorstep each morning. Within 6 months, Celia had moved to Coral Gables, a quiet neighborhood where Travis owned a 2-story white villa along the canal, with leaning palm trees and a pool that sparkled like something out of a Florida commercial. She left her classroom behind, entrusted Elvis to her mother, and became Mrs. Delaney, the woman who appeared flawless at her husband's side during charity galas, shareholder dinners, and ribbon-cutting ceremonies for buildings bearing the Delaney Foundation name. She learned to sit with a straight back, to smile at the right moments, to shake hands lightly, and to wear dresses that never wrinkled. From a small-town girl, Celia became the embodiment of refined grace, beautiful in a way that made people turn their heads twice. But behind the black iron gates and white marble walls, her marriage was nothing like the gleaming Instagram feed of Delaney Group. Travis was often absent, his late-night whispering phone calls, the distant look in his eyes when she spoke, the early warning signs that women often choose to ignore. because they don't want to shatter the illusion they've sacrificed their lives to build. And then Celia became pregnant. News she thought would heal every fracture. Travis held her, kissed her forehead, beamed when he heard the tiny heartbeat in the ultrasound room as if he truly wanted a fresh start. Celia believed him. She began knitting, reading parenting books, picking out baby names, even quietly planning to take a little money from her secondary account to buy a small home of her own, something that would belong solely to her. But then came that morning. She returned from New York earlier than expected. Travis thought she was still at her hotel. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. Sunlight spilled through the silk curtains, drawing a long line across the carpet as if heaven itself had placed a spotlight on what she needed to see. She didn't hear laughter or whispers, only the sound of quickened breathing, the faint slide of silk sheets, and the scent of an unfamiliar perfume mingling with Travis's familiar mint. The other woman was beautiful in an effortless way, long black hair cascading over her shoulders, her gaze a mix of contempt and triumph as she looked at Celia standing there. She didn't flinch. Neither did Travis. In the first seconds, he even thought he might be dreaming. And then Celia quietly turned and walked away, step by step, not running, not speaking, not looking back. No one called her name. No one followed. There were no explanations, no justifications. Back in her own room, Celia didn't cry. She opened the drawer of her vanity, took out a small USB drive she had hidden behind a lining of velvet, locked her suitcase, and left the house exactly as she had once entered it, silently, gracefully, without leaving a trace. And it was not an escape. It was the beginning. 3 days after Celia vanished, Travis Delaney appeared in front of the local television cameras as if he were playing the lead in a primetime drama. White dress shirt, gray tie, his face set with just enough tension to stir sympathy, but not so much as to make viewers doubt his control. He spoke of his beloved pregnant wife, who had suddenly become more sensitive than usual, and then left home. According to Travis, she just needed time to think. The Miami media, never once to miss a high society spectacle, instantly blew the story up. Headlines blared across front pages. The skies over Coral Gables tremble. Pregnant wife's mysterious disappearance. Paparazzi pitched tents outside the Delaney estate, while online forums split into camps, those pitying Celia and those speculating she was staging a drama to launch her own show. But at the county police department, there was one person who wasn't swept up in the noise: Detective Alexa Navarro. A Puerto Rican woman who had cracked some of the toughest cases in South Beach. Alexa cared nothing for media spotlights. She cared about details. And here, every detail was too clean to be real. The missing persons file noted no signs of struggle, no break-in, no witnesses who had seen Celia leave. Clothes, jewelry, personal items, all untouched. Yet there was no trace of her having been there in the days before she vanished. The fridge was empty, her phone switched off, no bank transactions after the day she left. Most suspicious of all, the home security camera system was under maintenance on the very night she disappeared. Alexa didn't believe in coincidences, not when they came packaged with a millionaire and a scandal. During a scene inspection, while pulling open the bottom drawer of the wardrobe, her eyes caught something along the underside edge. A crumpled scrap of paper, rolled tight and taped with thin adhesive on the bottom, a place no one would ever notice unless they bent down low. On it, a single handwritten line in purple ink. USB backup. She slipped the note into her pocket without a word. Sometimes, silence is the brightest light in the dark. Back at her desk, Alexa pulled up the corporate records for Travis Delaney Foundation, Delaney Group Holdings, a web of satellite companies stretching from Florida to the Virgin Islands. Everything as glossy as the press made it out to be. But the closer she looked, the more tangled it became. Like a dessert that's too sweet, you know something's off, even if you can't name it yet. Still, Celia wasn't the type of woman to leave without reason. Alexa had watched an interview from years earlier, when Celia was honored as Teacher of the Year. Intelligent, composed, full of life. Nothing in that footage hinted that she was the kind of person to abandon everything over a few arguments. But there were no signs she had been forced either. She had vanished as if she had planned it, leaving behind a clue so small that only someone looking in the right place would ever find it. A riddle? Alexa combed through every document in Celia's file. Phone bills, bank records, medical charts. Nothing unusual. Until she noticed one tiny detail. Starting a month earlier, Celia had been transferring a small sum each week into an unnamed account at an online bank in Vermont. The amounts were modest, but regular, as if she were building her own little nest. And that nest, Alexa thought, might very well be built around a USB drive. She dug deeper into the property records. Before her marriage, Celia had owned a small apartment in Coconut Grove. Sold. But that apartment had come with a bank safe deposit box nearby, one that had never been closed. One quick phone call later, and 3 hours after that, Alexa held a photograph of a safe deposit box, the initials CH, faintly etched in the corner inside, a silver USB stick sealed in an envelope, its head marked with an encrypted code. The story was no longer Celia disappeared. It was Celia disappeared and left bait. If every mystery had a scent, then the disappearance of Celia Harper would surely be a blend of expensive perfume, the sweat of fear, and a faint, artificial trace of vanilla from lies polished to perfection. And Detective Alexa Navarro, who had once tracked down a criminal from a lipstick smudge in the wrong shade, knew this was not just a runaway case born from marital conflict. There was something simmering here. Something far more dangerous. In the first days after discovering the USB hidden in Celia's safe deposit box, Alexa barely left her computer screen. She was no stranger to encrypted files or suspicious transactions dressed up under the poetic names of charitable organizations, Hope Horizons, Ocean Smile, One Seed Foundation. Names so beautiful they almost made you forget that behind them could be millions of dollars flowing through tax havens. Alexa needed a specialist, and no one was better than Jasmine Ward, the investigative financial journalist who had once exposed a money laundering investment fund operating through a dog rescue shelter in Palm Beach. Jasmine was sharp, relentless, and had an uncanny talent for making wealthy men sweat with nothing more than a single deliberate look. Their meeting took place in a retro-style cafe in Wynwood, where the coffee machine roared like a tank engine and the muffins were drier than the Nevada desert. But the information they shared made everything else in the room fade away. Jasmine had been tracking Travis Delaney long before this, not because of Celia's disappearance, but because the charity records for the Delaney Foundation had a strange, recurring, shape-shifting pattern. Every time they hosted a major event, a suspiciously large amount of money flowed overseas through subsidiaries, anonymous donations, special scholarship grants with no verifiable recipients. Celia Harper, the graceful, soft-spoken wife, turned out to be the missing link Jasmine had never anticipated, and the USB was the detonator. Alexa brought the USB to the Federal Digital Forensics Lab under special coordination. Inside was a labyrinth of data. Offshore transactions funneled through 3 layers of shell companies. Internal emails between Travis and a network of international attorneys revealed plans to route green project funding in Africa into accounts in Luxembourg, Guernsey, and Malta. And at the center of it all, the name Lucinda Voss, not just the lover on the bed the day Celia walked in, but the unofficial chief financial officer of Delaney Group. She controlled several auxiliary accounts, coordinated the outflow of charitable funds overseas, and acted as the broker for cash real estate purchases in the most expensive cities in America. Lucinda's presence in the financial network was anything but ornamental. She was the bridge, the one who knew exactly what needed to be hidden and who needed to disappear. Alexa realized in that moment, Celia had seen too much, not just an affair, but an entire financial empire teetering on exposure, and she had decided not to run, but to strike. The data on the USB revealed that Celia had been tracking Travis for months. She took screenshots of transactions when he was careless, secretly recorded calls, and stored files under pregnancy-related file names so no one would suspect. She had left breadcrumbs in the dense forest of financial deceit, just enough for someone like Alexa to piece together the whole picture. In an encrypted note, Celia had written, "Not every lie is covered by silence. Some truths just need the right person to bring them into the light." Alexa sat for hours after reading it. Celia hadn't run because she was weak. She wasn't afraid of Travis. She hadn't given up. She had planned alone, while carrying the child of the man she once loved. And instead of letting vengeance consume her, she had chosen to use the truth to end every cycle of deceit. Before leaving the cafe, Jasmine half-joked, half-warned, "If I ever disappear, check my shoe drawer. You might just find another USB in there." Alexa only smiled. She knew the real battle was still ahead. Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping, so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. In a quiet suburb of Charleston, where oak trees draped their branches over white wooden porches, and everyone knew the name of the neighbor's dog, Celia Harper was hiding in plain sight. No one here knew who she really was. They only knew her as a young pregnant woman who took walks each afternoon with a book in her hand and a faraway look in her eyes. But inside the modest red brick house, behind a door locked with care, Celia was not simply resting. She was rewriting her own fate and the fate of an entire empire. The only person who knew the truth was Noah Bradley, an old friend from college and now a freelance financial investigator. Back in their university days, Celia and Noah had written for the campus newspaper together, survived on instant noodles until morning, and once nearly got expelled for hacking into the digital library just to read materials for free. Their friendship was a fusion of logic and emotion, not romantic love, but a trust deep enough to guard the biggest secrets. When Celia disappeared from Coral Gables, she didn't just carry her pain with her. She carried evidence, the USB drive containing hundreds of files she had quietly collected for months while still playing the role of the gentle wife beside Travis. Noah was the only person she trusted enough to open it. The USB was not just storage, it was a map of wrongdoing. Inside were layers of encrypted transactions, forged invoices, internal memos, email exchanges between Travis and international partners, all painting a portrait of one of the most intricate money laundering schemes imaginable, disguised under the banner of charity. Noah spent weeks peeling back each layer of data. He was a man of few words, often with jazz humming in his headphones, drinking espresso out of a teacup. But in his work, he was so precise it could unsettle even the most seasoned hackers. Every time he cracked a layer of encryption, another truth emerged. Educational donations routed to shell organizations, only to vanish in Cyprus. Charitable land gifts that were, in fact, covert transactions between companies Travis secretly owned. Celia never left the house. She stayed inside, taking notes, making recordings, and occasionally baking banana bread to relieve the tension. She was still pregnant, and that made every action she took even more urgent. This was no longer about revenge. This was about building a cleaner world for the child she had yet to meet. Once they had organized enough evidence, Noah and Celia decided to send it to Jasmine in parts, ensuring that no one held the full picture. One file alone wouldn't be enough for Travis to strike back effectively, but 5 files from 5 different sources would be a lightning strike he could never dodge. Celia wrote a short note to accompany the first batch, unsigned. In it was a single line, "I am no longer someone's wife. I am the mother of something right." When Noah read that sentence, he said nothing. He simply handed her a cup of hot tea and sat with her on the porch. Outside, the Charleston sky was painted gold by the setting sun, and seagulls drifted past the rooftops. But within that peace, they both knew the real storm was still ahead. A pregnant woman, an old friend, and a USB drive. Could they do what the entire legal system had once failed to accomplish? None of the guests at the charity gala in Tampa that evening had any idea they were about to become witnesses to history. Crystal chandeliers cast a glittering light, champagne glasses were raised, silk gowns swept gracefully across the floor to the sound of violins. Travis Delaney, in a custom-tailored tuxedo, stepped up to the podium amid the usual wave of applause, still dashing, still wearing that cold smile and confident gaze, the perfect image of a financial savior. But behind the scenes, the gears had already begun to turn. Alexa Navarro, seated at table 9 alongside Jasmine Ward and 2 FBI agents, had a direct line of sight to the stage. In the tiny earpiece tucked beneath Alexa's curls came the confirmed signal. The USB drive matched biometric data. Celia Harper was indeed the rightful owner and sender of the files. Travis opened his speech with words of gratitude for the hearts that give back to the community. People laughed, people clapped, a few even shed tears. But on the giant screen behind him, where images of charitable projects were meant to play, the display suddenly went black. Then, line by line, data began to appear like sharp, cold incisions. Names, account numbers, bank statements, invoices, internal emails. Not art, not illustration, the truth. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then came a murmur, a whisper. Eyes turned to one another, as if to confirm they weren't dreaming. Travis froze. Sweat began to gather at his temples, and his gaze for the first time in years faltered. Alexa rose to her feet, walking slowly toward the stage, badge in hand. Behind her, Jasmine gave the slightest nod, and FBI cameras began rolling. Another agent quietly locked the doors. Alexa's voice rang out, clear and unshaken, without need for a microphone. Travis Delaney, you are under arrest for federal charges of money laundering, financial fraud, and bribery of multiple government officials. Lucinda Voss, standing just off stage, looked unsure whether to run or stay put, but before she could decide, a female agent moved in. Travis tried to say something, but his words were drowned out by the click of camera shutters, the hushed gasps of the crowd, and the cold metallic snap of handcuffs locking shut. That charity gala became breaking news across every national network. Yet what stunned the public most was how every single file from the very first document to the biometric proof was later released by Jasmine with transparency and surgical precision. Social media exploded. Former business partners turned away. Delaney Group's stock plummeted like a roller coaster in free fall. Those who had once praised Travis now stood in confusion, and those who had been silent began to speak. And while the outside world spiraled into chaos, in Charleston, Celia sat in an old wooden chair on her porch, her hand resting gently on her belly. In her lap lay a newspaper, its headline splashed across the front. Travis Delaney arrested. Empire collapses over USB and the woman who vanished. Celia smiled. Not the smile of triumph, but the smile of someone who had just set down a weight she had carried too long. Noah, standing beside her with his familiar cup of tea, simply said, "Worth losing a few nights' sleep over, isn't it?" And the child, though not yet born, now had a cleaner world to grow into. A mother once betrayed, once silent, who in the end had used her intellect and courage to rewrite the ending of her own story. After everything, Celia did not return in a blaze of glory. She came back in the shadows, no noise, no titles, no cheering crowds. But that had never been what she needed. Because the most important things she had kept, her freedom, the truth, and the future of the child, growing inside her day by day. The FBI placed Celia in the Witness Protection Program, not because she was a victim, but because she was a key whistleblower in one of the largest financial cases in U.S. history. They gave her a new name, a new address, and a life no longer tied to the past. Under that new name, Celia lived in a lakeside town in Oregon, a place where the mist hung heavier than the sunlight, and no one asked her about Travis, the scandal, or the USB. Here, she was allowed to be a mother, not somebody's wife. No longer the woman who had to wear lipstick to please someone else. She could live simply. Her son was born on a crisp autumn morning, healthy, his eyes wide open as if he already knew his mother's story before his first cry. She named him Miles, a name unburdened by debt, untouched by vengeance. Celia began to write again. Anonymous articles sent to investigative news outlets, stories about professional ethics and hidden power. Though unsigned, her voice carried, inspiring others. Women who had been deceived, dismissed, or overlooked found in her words a quiet but unshakable strength. Jasmine Ward retold the entire story not as a scandal, but as a journey of survival and overthrow. She devoted her final chapter to the woman who chose truth over revenge, chose silence over spectacle, and in doing so, brought an entire system to its knees. Celia read that article on her phone while her son slept on her chest. She did not cry, but her heart eased, as if setting down a stone she had carried for far too long. Alexa Navarro, who had followed the case from the very beginning, eventually sent Celia a small gift, a wooden frame with a hand-carved inscription inside. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it does, it brings peace. That night, as the wind moved through the pines, Celia sat on the porch, watching Miles sleep soundly. This life had once been a locked room, once a shattered dream. But now, it was a small home, with a door always slightly open. No one could decide for her anymore. No one held a secret she could not uncover. Celia Harper, now anonymous in the world, had used truth to cleanse an empire, and the power of motherhood to triumph over hatred. She had not returned for revenge. She had returned simply to live as herself. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe. The baby isn't mine. The cold shout ripped through the gleaming penthouse, slicing the air like a blade. Rachel, 8 months pregnant, froze, her hands clutching the life inside her belly. The man who had once knelt to propose now looked at her with eyes full of suspicion, and her heart plummeted into a bottomless void. The entire world seemed to collapse into that single sentence denying her love, denying her honor. But would the DNA test only prove a simple truth, or unveil a far more terrifying secret? The Golden City lights filtered through the wide glass windows like a film screen, casting faint streaks across the polished wooden floor. Their penthouse looked like something out of a magazine. Cream Italian sofas, a marble table, a crystal chandelier scattering tiny points of light. At the center of it all, Rachel sat on the chaise, her hand resting on her swollen belly, her face weary yet touched with the quiet joy of a mother awaiting her first child. She had once believed herself the luckiest woman in the world. Jonathan, a real estate millionaire, had entered her life like a dream already written. A proposal under Parisian lamplight, vows exchanged along the Hudson River, and now this lavish home in the heart of Manhattan. Friends were envious, her family proud. Rachel thought, if there was heaven on earth, surely it looked like the moment Jonathan knelt and slipped the ring onto her finger. But heaven could crack without anyone hearing the sound. It began with small details. Jonathan came home later, offering excuses. The meeting ran long. The partner flew in from California. Once, he used to burst through the door with a wide smile and a hug from behind. Now he placed his keys down quietly, not even meeting Rachel's eyes. Dinners that once rang with laughter and plans for the future became filled only with the clinking of silverware against porcelain. With the patience of a devoted wife, Rachel told herself, it's just work stress. New projects, the real estate market shifting. Sometimes, she even joked to lighten the air, mentioning the silly baby names they had once laughed over. But Jonathan only nodded vaguely, his gaze fixed on his phone. By the 7th month of pregnancy, the distance was undeniable. At night, she lay on her side, one hand on her belly, the other on the cold, empty space beside her. Jonathan still came home, but his mind was elsewhere. In those lonely nights, the sound of the baby's heartbeat echoed in her silence, a reminder that at least one tiny life still trusted her completely. Then came the night that changed everything. There was no storm to forewarn it. Just another evening. Rain against the window, Rachel folding baby clothes, Jonathan walking in heavy-shouldered. He didn't remove his coat, didn't greet his wife. He just stared, eyes glacial, and spoke words as sharp as a blade. I want to test. This baby. Is it really mine? The room froze. Rachel thought she had misheard. But no, the words pierced her heart like nails. The man who had once held her up before the world now questioned the very blood they shared. She stood stunned. Her throat went dry, her hands clutched at her blouse. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She only felt herself go cold from the inside out. The months of happiness, the nights spent painting dreams of a family, all shattered in a single sentence. In the mirror behind, she caught her own reflection. A woman 8 months pregnant, eyes wide in disbelief, and the yawning gulf stretching between them. Jonathan left the room, leaving behind a silence that weighed like stone. Rachel sank onto the chair, pressing her hand to her belly, feeling the baby's gentle kick within. That tiny heart still beat, still trusted, still belonged to her. But in that moment, Rachel realized faith in a marriage could collapse faster than a gust of wind. Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story, as the twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping, so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. The hum of the air conditioner echoed through the hospital corridor, blending with the click of nurses' heels and the crackle of numbers called over the loudspeaker. Rachel sat among the rows of cold plastic chairs, her hands cradling her heavy belly, eyes fixed on the reception desk. The white lights blazed so harshly they seemed to strip everything bare, leaving her feeling exposed, unable to hide the shame gnawing at her. In her hand, the registration slip trembled. Just a few simple words. DNA test for paternity. To an outsider, it was a sterile formality. To Rachel, it was a verdict on her honor. A husband who once vowed unconditional love had turned her into a suspect, forcing her to prove herself with her own blood. She remembered the whisper in the night, Jonathan demanding the test in a voice as cold as if discussing a business deal. No hand to hold, no glance to comfort. The shadow of him framed in the doorway that night was burned into her memory like an indelible stain. A young nurse approached, eyes flicking from Rachel's belly to the paper in her hand. That hesitant look pierced her like 1,000 needles. Rachel pressed her lips together, straightened her posture, willing her pride to shield her from invisible judgment. Finally, her name was called. Rachel rose slowly, each step doubled in weight by the 8 months she carried. The examination room was icy, the sting of disinfectant sharp in her nose. The blood-draw chair was rigid, the lamp glaring down until her eyes ached. The technician slid the needle into Rachel's arm. Blood streamed into the clear vial. Instead of flinching, Rachel closed her eyes, her free hand on her belly. Inside, the baby kicked, a small but fierce signal. She mouthed silently, "I will prove us. I swear." Each drop drawn was a drop of humiliation, but also a vow of honor. In this moment, Rachel knew she wasn't just defending herself, she was protecting the birth of an innocent child. The procedure ended quickly. Papers were stamped in red, envelopes sealed tight. But to Rachel, each stamp felt like a knife. Leaving the room, she walked the crowded hallway, avoiding curious eyes. Outside, Manhattan's drizzle streaked long trails across the glass. In the window's reflection, she saw herself, a pregnant woman trembling but with eyes blazing with resolve. The days waiting for results dragged like centuries. Jonathan asked nothing, shared nothing, as if he had already convinced himself she was guilty. Each meal, each night's sleep, the invisible gulf widened. The glittering penthouse had become a cold box, where a woman nourished a child while preparing to defend her own name. Late at night, Rachel sat by the window, tracing circles on the glass. Below, the city glowed bright, but inside her was darkness. Sometimes she let out a soft laugh, a bitter one. Who could have imagined the man who swore eternal vows would drive her here? On the day of results, Rachel arrived early. In her hands was a thick, carefully sealed envelope. She entered a private office, sat before the doctor's desk. Jonathan wasn't there. He had said, "Just have them send the results directly to me." His indifference cut deep, but it also steeled her to face it alone. The doctor slid the file toward her, Rachel opened it, eyes scanning quickly. The first line hit her like an electric current. Paternity confirmed. 99.9% probability. Jonathan was the father. In that instant, tears fell not from weakness, but because the truth had spoken for her. Her pride returned, though her heart still bled. But then, just below the conclusion, a small note. Data from the embryo bank indicated Jonathan had undergone an IVF procedure 2 years earlier with Miranda Cruz. Rachel froze. The relief in her chest plummeted into an abyss. Jonathan hadn't just doubted her. He had hidden an earth-shattering secret from his own wife, and Miranda, the best friend by her side all these years, was part of it. The test result lay still on the table, the white glare of fluorescent light carving each word deeper into Rachel's eyes. Paternity confirmed. 99.9% probability. Jonathan was the biological father. In that first moment, she felt as if she had been pulled from an abyss, no longer forced to live under suspicion, no longer the woman unjustly accused. But the relief hadn't even spread before Rachel's eyes caught the small footnote below. Dry, clinical words, yet heavy enough to crush a life. Donor history, cross-reference, Jonathan Black, IVF procedure, 2 years prior. Partner, Miranda C. Cruz. Rachel's body turned to ice. For a moment she heard nothing but the rush of blood in her ears. The world around her, the printer's hum, the nurse's footsteps in the hall dissolved, leaving only 4 letters burning into her mind. Miranda. Miranda Cruz, the best friend since high school, the one who held Rachel's hand in the hospital after her first miscarriage, the one who brought waffles every morning so Rachel wouldn't feel alone. And now, her name appeared right next to Jonathan's in the IVF records. Rachel sank into the chair, arms wrapped around her belly, her breath ragged. The sting of betrayal didn't just come from her husband, but from the friend she had once considered a sister. She replayed every intimate moment, afternoons when Miranda hung new pictures in the penthouse, evenings when she and Jonathan sat in the living room while all 3 laughed about the future. Now, each memory shattered into sharp fragments, reflecting a brutal truth. The secret had never left this home. It had always been right in front of her, unseen because she hadn't wanted to see. She bit her lip until it bled. Part of her wanted to rip the result apart, pretend she had never read it. But the deeper instinct honed from years of analyzing every tiny detail, a survival instinct, stopped her. DNA doesn't lie. Those cold numbers were undeniable proof. Rachel carefully slid the file into her bag. As she walked out of the hospital, each step weighed heavy, each heel striking the floor like a reminder. He didn't just doubt you. He buried an entire life from you. Outside, the drizzle clung to the taxi window, trailing into long streaks. Rachel looked out, the city of New York blurred like a smeared painting. Inside the car, her belly shifted a kick that affirmed the baby's presence. Rachel placed her hand there, her eyes sparking with resolve. If the truth doesn't come to me, I will go and find it. All of it. Back at the penthouse, Jonathan wasn't home. On the kitchen counter sat a half-finished coffee cup, once familiar but now strangely alien. She opened a drawer, pulled out the leather notebook she had used in her financial research days. The pen scratched across the page. Dates, details, every thread connecting Jonathan and Miranda. She wrote not just to record, but to weave the strands, to expose the logic hidden beneath the flawless facade. She thought of Miranda, the smile that shone just a little too brightly, the eyes that sometimes shifted when Jonathan's schedule came up. The words that still echoed. You're so lucky to have Jonathan. He's perfect. Once, Rachel took it as praise. Now it rang like a cruel, mocking taunt. Rachel snapped the notebook shut, her back straightening. For the first time in weeks, she no longer felt like a victim. The fury inside her did not spill into tears, it hardened into something else. A cold, sharp clarity. The DNA had proven Jonathan was the father, but it had also unlocked a past he had tried to bury. And Miranda, her best friend, had stood right beside Rachel all this time, never breathing a word. The sound of typing echoed through the silent penthouse. Rachel sat before the screen, her hair hastily tied, dark circles under her eyes but burning with intensity. Old files, hospital records, and financial invoices stacked high like fortress walls. Each keystroke, each line printed, felt like another piece of the puzzle sliding into place. And then, the picture began to sharpen. Jonathan and Miranda had a history Rachel had never been allowed to touch. Not coincidence, not misunderstanding, but a chain of events buried deep, pressed under the dust of silence. 2 years before Rachel entered Jonathan's life, he and Miranda had been together. A brief, quiet affair, known to few. In the hospital records, Rachel saw it clearly. An IVF procedure, Jonathan and Miranda's names, side by side. A single attempt to create life, ending in a miscarriage. Rachel's hand instinctively moved to her rounded belly. A foreign grief she had never witnessed now tied itself directly to her own life. Miranda had lost a child. And instead of healing, that loss had become the seed of envy. She remembered Miranda's eyes when looking at the white crib Rachel had just placed in the nursery. That glance had carried sorrow, which Rachel had read as a friend's emotion. Now, the memory cut like a cold blade. Jonathan, in a saved email, had once written, "I owe you. I will never let that be forgotten." A strange debt, a rope binding the two in silence. Jonathan had chosen to bury it. Out of shame, perhaps, or guilt, but the secrecy had turned into a ticking time bomb, smoldering inside the very home Rachel lived in. Rachel closed her eyes, replaying each dinner with Miranda at the table. The smile too bright, the presence too natural. The times Jonathan hurriedly changed the subject when she brushed close to the past. The signs had been there all along. She had chosen trust, because friendship and love often blur reason. Inside her, conflicting tides rose, pity for the woman who had once lost so much, and disgust that this same woman had sown suspicion into her marriage. Rachel stood, walked to the tall mirror in the living room. Reflected back was a wife 8 months pregnant, shoulders heavy, but with eyes no longer trembling. Pain was crystallizing into something else, sharp clarity. She knew silence was no longer an option. Jonathan had chosen to conceal. Miranda had chosen to pretend, but Rachel would not. No one had the right to turn her life into a stage for hidden secrets. Rachel returned to the desk, opened her leather notebook, and wrote in bold, "Past equals weapon. No more concealment." Each page became a strategy. She noted the doctor who oversaw the IVF, the date Miranda was admitted, the invoices transferring money from Jonathan's account. Everything turned into evidence. Not just to expose the truth, but to seize back control of her own life. Outside, rain began to fall. Heavy drops struck the glass, spreading like ink stains. Rachel gazed out at the glowing city, a new resolve rising in her chest. The sound of night rain pattered against the glass, blending with the flicker of the laptop screen. Rachel sat motionless, shoulders taut, her hand gliding slowly across the keys. She was no longer the wife waiting for an explanation, no longer just a mother keeping her baby calm inside her. In this moment, she returned to her old instincts. A sharp financial analyst, once paid to uncover the single digit a system wanted desperately to hide. The screen displayed dry lines of data, hospital invoices, payment statements, transfer trails. Rachel pulled each file into a master sheet, her eyes sweeping as though playing a familiar score. Every number, every date, every transaction code became notes exposing the truth. An IVF bill from 2 years ago, paid with a secondary credit card Jonathan had issued. A series of medical fees disguised as health consultations at the same hospital. Then, shady transfers from a subsidiary of Black's real estate empire, routed straight into a personal account under the name Miranda Cruz. Rachel scrolled, connecting the dots. The more she looked, the clearer the network became. Jonathan hadn't just betrayed her emotionally. He had concealed an entire financial medical underground to keep his ties with Miranda alive. This wasn't just betrayal of love. It was systematic fraud. In the silent room, Rachel let out a faint laugh. Not joy, but the cold sound of someone who had found the final piece of the puzzle. She had once nailed financial criminals with nothing more than a stray bubble tea receipt in a bank statement. Now, with this evidence, Jonathan looked no different from a con man draped in the suit of a successful businessman. Rachel opened another old folder, pulling up hospital logs from the day Miranda miscarried. The notes confirmed. Miranda was admitted not only as a patient, but with Jonathan by her side, signing papers as next of kin. Proof so cold it could not be denied. Each discovery hurt, yet fueled her at the same time. Hurt because the truth revealed that every warm dinner, every gentle word from Miranda had been painted over with envy. But fueled because now Rachel knew she was no longer the passive one. She was not the woman under suspicion. She was the one holding the power. She carefully printed every record, stacking them into files, medical records, financial transfers, corporate links. On each cover, Rachel wrote one word by hand: evidence. These weren't just papers, they were weapons. It was late. The city outside still glowed, but inside the penthouse, only the hum of the printer and the steady rhythm of a fetal heartbeat filled the air. Rachel stood, pacing a few steps to stretch, one hand resting on her belly, as if speaking to her child. See, I won't let anyone else define our life anymore. I will be the one to write it. She sat back down and opened the laptop once more. This time, Rachel wasn't just storing. She uploaded a full copy of the data to an external encrypted server. No one, not even Jonathan, could erase it. The evidence was safe. When the screen flashed back up complete, Rachel exhaled, but the weight was gone. In the dim light, her eyes gleamed with resolve. A plan had taken shape, to confront not with tears, but with truth laid out clearly, coldly, beyond denial. The courtroom door shut with a dry clack, echoing in the silence like a bell signaling a new era. Rachel rose from the plaintiff's seat, her pregnant belly carried low, her shoulders straight as if no weight in the world could ever make her bow again. Before her, the large screen displayed the chain of evidence. The DNA report confirming Jonathan as the father, the financial records exposing secret transfers, and the hospital files certifying the old IVF procedure with Miranda. There was no room left for excuses. Each document was a blade, clean and precise, cutting away the mask Jonathan had worn before society. Across the room, Jonathan sat rigid, color drained from his face. Miranda shrank into the shadows, her panicked eyes dodging every lens. Outside the hallway, reporters pressed close, pens poised, ready to watch the man once hailed as the real estate king crumble. The judge read the verdict. No need to raise his voice. The truth itself resounded louder than any decree. Jonathan was stripped of financial privileges, ordered to pay damages, and faced an investigation for fraud. Miranda vanished that very day, as if society itself had swallowed her whole. Rachel did not cry. She did not celebrate. She simply stepped out of the courthouse, the late winter sun on her face, leaving the storm of scandal behind. All eyes turned toward her, but Rachel knew, today, she was no longer the accused wife. She was living proof of the power of truth. 6 months later, a small office building in Brooklyn. White walls bearing a polished metal plaque, the Phoenix Fund. It was neither an investment firm nor a legal branch. It was the place Rachel built from the ashes, transforming her personal pain into a weapon for the community. Inside, the space buzzed with energy. Young women scanning support files on glowing screens. Another group preparing a workshop on financial abuse awareness. On the main wall hung a line Rachel had written herself in black marker. Reclaiming your name means reclaiming your life. Every time she passed, Rachel paused for a few seconds, her hand resting on a stroller where her baby girl slept soundly. In those tiny breaths, she felt not only her daughter's life but a reminder, every woman defamed deserves a rebirth. On her desk lay a stack of new cases, stories uncannily similar to her own. A wife accused of infidelity so her husband could seize custody. An employee slandered by colleagues to end her career. A daughter silenced by her family for saving face. Now, they turned to Rachel not as victims, but as followers of a banner she had raised. She smiled faintly, a smile tinged with both bitterness and pride. Who would have thought that the woman once trembling in a hospital hallway, lip bitten as she endured the humiliation of a DNA test, would now sit here as a strategist, turning truth itself into the sharpest counterattack? The press wrote about her, from the wife accused by her husband to the founder of Phoenix Fund. But Rachel knew titles mattered less than the message. She hadn't just reclaimed her name, she had redefined it. Outside, New York pulsed on, its lights never sleeping. But within this room, another light burned, the light of truth, of women learning to rise from ruin. Rachel lifted her daughter, kissed her forehead softly. Her voice was a whisper, yet unwavering. You will grow up in a world where your mother's name isn't defined by anyone else, and neither will yours. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe. Get out! The scream echoes as Sophia, 8 months pregnant, is shoved from a gleaming Bentley onto Miami's rain-soaked streets. Her $2,000 dress clings to her trembling body, her world shattered by her millionaire husband, Ethan, who calls her a disgrace. Alone, heartbroken, she clutches her belly, fearing for her unborn child. But the silent driver, watching through the rearview mirror, hides a secret that could destroy Ethan. Who is this mysterious man, and how will he change Sophia's fate? Stick around, this story of betrayal and redemption will leave you speechless. The rain lashed against the Bentley Continental's tinted windows, a relentless Miami downpour that turned Ocean Drive into a shimmering blur of neon and despair. Inside, the silence between Sophia Alvarez and her tech mogul husband, Ethan Caldwell, was colder than the storm outside. The car's interior, a cathedral of hand-stitched leather and polished walnut, felt like a gilded cage, trapping Sophia in its opulent embrace. Her 8-month pregnant frame shifted uncomfortably, the $2,000 silk dress clinging to her skin, a cruel reminder of the life she'd traded her freedom for. They had just left a glittering charity gala at the Fontainebleau, where Miami's elites sipped champagne under chandeliers. But the night had soured when a drunken investor, a sleazy real estate tycoon with a leer that made Sophia's skin crawl, cornered her with crude remarks about her unborn child. Before she could react, Henry Langston, a silver-haired titan of industry, had stepped in, his calm authority sending the creeps scurrying. Ethan, however, saw only humiliation. His Brioni suit, tailored to perfection, seemed to tighten with his rage. He gripped his phone, knuckles white, his jaw clenched so hard it might have cracked a diamond. Sophia, her hand protectively cradling her belly, felt her baby kick a tiny rebellion against the tension suffocating the car. She'd seen this Ethan before, the one who morphed from charming tech prodigy to a man obsessed with control. At the gala, he'd been all smiles, toasting investors with promises of his next big app. But now, alone with her, his mask was off. The air was thick with his unspoken accusation. She'd made him look weak. Her attempt to defend herself, whispering that Henry Langston was only being kind, fell flat, like a pebble tossed into the Atlantic. Ethan's eyes, sharp as the Miami skyline, didn't even flicker her way. He was a king dethroned in his own mind, and Sophia was the scapegoat. The Bentley purred through the storm, its headlights slicing through the rain like a predator's gaze. Sophia's mind replayed the gala, the clinking glasses, the whispers of power deals, the way Ethan's charm had once swept her off her feet. She'd been a budding curator at a small Coconut Grove gallery, her days filled with dusty canvases and dreams of showcasing new artists. Ethan, a Forbes 30 under 30 darling, had promised her the world, a penthouse, designer dresses, a life of influence, but that world came with chains. Her simple upbringing, her love for quiet coffee shops and indie art, was a stain on his perfect image. Her pregnancy, meant to be a shared joy, had become another variable for him to manage, from her diet to her wardrobe, all curated to project power. The car slowed, veering onto a dimly lit side street far from their South Beach penthouse. Sophia's heart sank. This wasn't home. The rain pounded harder, as if the sky itself was furious. Ethan's silence broke, not with words, but with a single, deliberate motion. He leaned across her, his cologne sharp and suffocating, and pressed the door release. The lock clicked, and a gust of wet, salty air rushed in. Sophia froze, her breath catching as she realized what was coming. Ethan's face, carved from marble and malice, turned to her at last. His expression held no warmth, only a cold, calculated disgust. He didn't need to speak. His actions screamed louder than the storm. With a gentle but firm push, he forced her out, her heels slipping on the wet pavement. The door slammed shut, a gunshot in the night, leaving her alone, drenched and trembling. Sophia stood there, one hand clutching her belly, the other shielding her face from the rain's assault. Her dress, once a symbol of Ethan's wealth, was now a sodden weight, dragging her toward despair. The Bentley's taillights glowed red, mocking her as they faded into the storm. She felt small, insignificant, like a discarded prop in Ethan's meticulously staged life. The city's pulse-honking horns, distant salsa music seemed to mock her too, a reminder of the vibrant Miami she'd once loved but now felt so far away. Her baby kicked again, a spark of defiance in the darkness. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. But as the rain soaked her to the bone, a flicker of movement caught her eye. The driver's door opened, and a figure stepped out, unfazed by the deluge. Who was this man, and why did his calm presence feel like the first hint of salvation? Sophia's tears mixed with the rain, her heart a tangled knot of fear and shame. She'd been Ethan's trophy, his perfect wife, but tonight, she was nothing more than a burden he'd cast aside. The driver, Mr. Thompson, had always been a quiet, constant, polite, almost invisible, his kind eyes catching hers in the rearview mirror. Now, as he stood in the storm, his silhouette framed by the Bentley's headlights, there was something different about him. A strength, a purpose that made her pulse quicken. Was he just a witness to her humiliation, or something more? The answer lay just beyond the rain, and missing it would be a regret she couldn't bear. The Miami rain hammered the pavement, a merciless curtain that drenched Sofia Alvarez as she stumbled on the slick Ocean Drive sidewalk, her silk dress a soggy, $2,000 ruin, clinging to her trembling, 8-month pregnant frame. Her world had collapsed in the echo of her husband Ethan's cruel dismissal, the Bentley's taillights vanishing like a broken promise. Alone she stood, one hand shielding her belly where her baby kicked with stubborn defiance, the other wiping rain, or was it tears, from her eyes. The city's neon pulse mocked her despair, its salsa rhythms a cruel reminder of the vibrant life she'd once known. Then, a sound pierced the storm, the soft click of the Bentley's driver's side door. Mr. Thompson, the ever-quiet chauffeur, emerged, his tall frame undeterred by the downpour, his gray uniform darkening with each raindrop. Without a word, he shrugged off his wool coat, draping it over Sophia's shoulders like a shield against the cold. The warmth of the fabric was a fleeting comfort, a whisper of hope in the chaos. Sophia's breath hitched as Mr. Thompson gestured toward the Bentley, not to the back seat where she'd spent countless rides as Ethan's curated trophy, but to the front passenger seat, a gesture so unexpected it felt like a rebellion against her husband's world. She hesitated, her soaked heels wobbling, but his steady hand guided her, a silent promise of safety. Inside, the car's heated leather enveloped her, a stark contrast to the icy rejection outside. Mr. Thompson slid into the driver's seat, his movements calm, almost ceremonial, as he cranked the heat to full blast. The air warmed her shivering bones, and for a moment, the storm seemed to retreat. Then he turned to her, his kind eyes, those same eyes she'd glimpsed in the rearview mirror countless times, now burning with a quiet fury, not at her but at the injustice she'd endured. His face, weathered yet resolute, held a depth she'd never noticed in his months as their driver. In that charged silence he spoke, his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of a long-held secret. He was no mere chauffeur. He was Henry Langston, The billionaire who'd silenced the room at the Fontainebleau Gala, the man Ethan had courted for months to fund his tech empire. More astonishingly, he was her godfather, bound by a vow to her late father, Miguel Alvarez, to watch over her. Sophia's mind reeled, her thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief and dawning clarity. Henry Langston, the titan of logistics who could make markets tremble with a phone call, had been hiding in plain sight, chauffeuring her through Miami's glittering chaos. His presence at the gala hadn't been a coincidence. He'd been there, as always, to protect her. Sophia's gaze darted to the rain-streaked windshield, where Miami's skyline blurred into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. She'd always seen Mr. Thompson as a fixture, like the Bentley's chrome trim, polished, reliable, invisible. Yet now, his quiet kindnesses flashed through her memory. The bottle of water left in the back seat on sweltering days, the way he'd lingered a moment longer when she seemed unsteady, the gentle nod when she'd thanked him for small courtesies. He'd been her unseen guardian, a sentinel disguised in a driver's cap, watching over her as Ethan's control tightened. The humor of it struck her, a billionaire playing chauffeur, probably chuckling to himself as Ethan strutted like a peacock, oblivious to the real power in the driver's seat. Henry's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles betraying a restrained anger. He didn't need to say more. His presence was a vow, a promise that Ethan's cruelty would not go unanswered. The Bentley purred to life, gliding away from the desolate street, not toward Sophia's sterile South Beach penthouse, but toward a sanctuary she couldn't yet imagine. Her heart pounded, not with fear now, but with a spark of something new, hope perhaps, or the faint outline of vengeance. As the city lights streaked past, she sensed a shift, a storm of her own brewing. Henry's secret was the key to unlocking her cage, but what lay beyond the rain-soaked horizon? Missing this would be a regret too heavy to bear. The Bentley glided through Miami's rain-slicked streets, its headlights carving a path through the neon glow of Coconut Grove toward a coral stone mansion nestled in the heart of Coral Gables. Sophia Alvarez, still wrapped in Mr. Thompson No, Henry Langston's wool coat, sat in the front seat, her soaked dress, a heavy reminder of Ethan's betrayal. The warmth of the car's heater battled the chill in her bones, but it was the weight of Henry's revelation that set her heart racing. He wasn't just a driver. He was her godfather, a billionaire guardian hiding behind a chauffeur's cap. As the city's vibrant pulse faded into the quiet elegance of Coral Gables, Sophia sensed the storm of her life shifting towards something monumental, a truth that could rewrite her story. The mansion's wrought iron gates parted silently, ushering them into a world of old money charm. Inside, a cozy library awaited, its mahogany shelves brimming with leather-bound books, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and polished wood. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting golden flickers across the room, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile penthouse Sophia shared with Ethan. She sank into a plush armchair, her pregnant belly a gentle weight, her baby's faint kicks a reminder of the life she fought for. Henry stood by the fireplace, his silver hair catching the light, his face etched with a mix of sorrow and resolve. His presence, once unassuming behind the wheel, now radiated a quiet power that filled the room like the hum of a distant storm. In this sanctuary, Henry unraveled a secret that shook Sophia to her core. Her father, Miguel Alvarez, hadn't just been the gentle art historian she remembered, a man who spun tales of Renaissance painters over bedtime stories. He was Henry's closest friend, his brother in all but blood, and the co-founder of Langston Global, a logistics empire that moved art, cargo, and wealth across continents. Their partnership began in a cramped Miami garage, fueled by Miguel's passion for beauty and Henry's knack for turning dreams into dollars. When Miguel died in a tragic car crash when Sophia was 12, Henry made a vow at his bedside to protect his daughter and wife. The humor of it tickled Sophia's frayed nerves, a billionaire godfather playing chauffeur, probably smirking as he polished the Bentley while Ethan preened, oblivious to the titan in his employ. Henry's voice softened as he revealed the heart of the secret. Miguel's stake in Langston Global, carefully nurtured over decades, had grown into a trust fund worth $5.2 billion. Sophia, unaware of her own wealth, was one of America's richest women, her fortune dwarfing Ethan's leveraged tech empire. The numbers danced in her mind, too many zeros, too surreal to grasp. All her life, she'd lived modestly, her mother insisting on a grounded upbringing, shielding her from the corrupting lure of wealth. Ethan had preyed on that modesty, casting her as a humble curator he'd rescued with his wealth, when in truth, her inheritance could buy his company 10 times over. The irony was delicious, like a plot twist in a Miami telenovela, and Sophia's lips twitched at the thought of Ethan's smug face crumbling if he knew. Her mind spun, piecing together fragments of her past. Her mother's pride, refusing lavish gifts, the scholarships that mysteriously appeared for her art history degree, the quiet donations to her gallery. Henry had been there, a shadow orchestrating her safety, never interfering until Ethan's cruelty forced his hand. His eyes, kind yet fierce, met hers, and she saw not just a protector, but a man carrying the weight of a promise kept through decades. The storm outside raged on, but within these walls, Sophia felt a spark ignite a realization that she wasn't Ethan's victim, but the heir to a legacy of strength and vision. Her father's dreams, his love for art, lived in her, and this fortune was her birthright, not Ethan's to control. As the fire's warmth seeped into her, Sophia's fear began to melt, replaced by a burgeoning resolve. She wasn't just a discarded wife. She was Miguel's daughter, a woman with the power to reshape her future. Henry's revelation wasn't just about money, it was a call to reclaim her identity. But what would she do with this newfound power, and how would it change the game against Ethan? Walking away now would mean missing a transformation too epic to ignore. Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping, so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales. In the heart of Henry Langston's Coral Gables mansion, Sofia Alvarez stood at the edge of a transformation, the firelight from the library's hearth casting her shadow as a warrior ready to rise. The revelation of her $5.2 billion inheritance still buzzed in her veins, a pulse of power that drowned out the echo of Ethan's cruelty. Gone was the trembling woman abandoned in Miami's rain. In her place was a spark of fury, fueled by the legacy of her father, Miguel Alvarez. The opulent room, with its velvet drapes and shelves of art tomes, felt like a war room now, where Sophia's fear was forging into resolve. Her baby's gentle kicks, a rhythm of defiance, urged her forward, whispering that she was no longer Ethan's pawn but a queen reclaiming her board. The mansion's quiet elegance stood in stark contrast to the sterile South Beach penthouse where Ethan had caged her dreams. Sophia's mind flickered to the nights she'd spent there, her love for art relegated to choosing wall decor to match his ego. Now, in this sanctuary, she saw a path to freedom. Henry, her billionaire godfather, leaned against the fireplace, his silver hair glinting like a crown of wisdom. His calm presence was a lighthouse in her storm, guiding her toward action. With his support, Sophia reached out to Olivia Harper, Miami's sharpest divorce attorney, whose reputation for dismantling powerful men was whispered about in boardrooms and beach clubs alike. Olivia's office, a sleek glass fortress in Brickell, became Sophia's first battlefield. The attorney's piercing gaze and tailored suit exuded a confidence that felt contagious, a promise that Ethan's empire could crumble. Sophia's heart burned with a single unshakable desire, not for Ethan's wealth, but for liberation from his shadow. She envisioned a future where her unborn son, nestled safely within her, would know a mother who stood tall, not one, bowed by control. The idea of Ethan's smug face, so certain of his dominance, twisting in defeat, brought a fleeting, almost guilty smile to her lips. Imagine him, the tech golden boy, outmaneuvered by the wife he'd discarded like last season's gadget. Her resolve hardened. She wanted him erased from her life, stripped of any claim to her child. Olivia, with a nod as sharp as a guillotine, understood. She'd promised a legal strategy that would cut through Ethan's arrogance like a Miami hurricane through a palm tree. Beyond the fight for freedom, Sophia's dreams began to take shape, rooted in the passion her father had instilled in her. She envisioned a gallery in Wynwood, Miami's pulsing art district, where vibrant murals danced on warehouse walls. The Alvarez Gallery would be her tribute to Miguel, a space to nurture young artists, their bold canvases a rebellion against the sterile world Ethan had forced upon her. She could already see it, sunlight streaming through loft windows, illuminating works that spoke of struggle and triumph, just as her own story was unfolding. The thought was a spark, igniting a creative fire she'd long suppressed. Henry watched her, his eyes crinkling with pride, as if seeing Miguel's spirit reborn in her ambition. His silent encouragement was a reminder that she carried a legacy no one could steal. Not Ethan, not the storm. The humor of her situation wasn't lost on her. A week ago, she'd been Ethan's trophy, her every move choreographed to his script. Now, armed with a billionaire godfather and a fortune that could buy half of South Beach, she was scripting her own comeback. It was like a plot twist in a blockbuster, the kind that makes audiences cheer. Sophia's hands rested on her belly, feeling her son's movements, a tiny co-conspirator in her revolution. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was building a world where her child would know strength, not submission. The mansion's warmth wrapped around her, a cocoon for her metamorphosis, but the real battle loomed ahead. Ethan's downfall was coming, and Sophia was ready to orchestrate it. But how far would her newfound power take her, and what price would Ethan pay? Walking away now would mean missing a reckoning too thrilling to ignore. The Miami skyline glittered like a crown of stars, but for Ethan Caldwell, it was the backdrop to his unraveling empire. In the days following Sofia Alvarez's transformation, Henry Langston unleashed a meticulously crafted storm of retribution from his Coral Gables stronghold. Sophia, once a trembling figure in the rain, now stood as a silent architect of justice, her resolve as unyielding as the $5.2 billion legacy pulsing through her veins. The Bentley's betrayal, where Ethan had cast her out like a discarded trophy, had ignited a fire that Henry, her billionaire godfather, was fanning into a blaze. His team, a cadre of financial sharks and legal hawks, moved with the precision of a Miami thunderstorm, striking at the heart of Ethan's tech empire with devastating force. Henry's plan was a masterclass in calculated chaos. His operatives, cloaked in the anonymity of boardroom warfare, shorted Ethan's company stock, triggering a cascade that saw shares plummet from a 20% dip to a catastrophic 60% free fall. Wall Street traders, once fawning over Ethan's keynote speeches, now fled like tourists before a hurricane. The financial press, ever hungry for scandal, branded him the tech charlatan, their headlines splashing across Miami's digital billboards like venom. Ethan's empire, built on leveraged loans and inflated promises, cracked under the pressure, its glass and steel offices in Brickell suddenly feeling like a house of cards. Sophia, from the quiet sanctuary of Henry's mansion, watched the news unfold, her heart a mix of vindication and quiet awe at the power she now wielded. The true dagger, however, was a grainy security video from the Bentley's dashboard camera, capturing every second of Ethan's cruelty that rain-soaked night. Sophia's silhouette, pregnant and pleading, stumbled into the storm as Ethan's cold shove sealed his fate. Olivia Harper, the razor-sharp attorney Sophia had enlisted, wielded this footage like a guillotine. In a sterile conference room overlooking Biscayne Bay, she presented Ethan with an ultimatum: sign the divorce papers, relinquish all rights to their unborn child, or watch the video go viral, shredding his reputation beyond repair. Ethan, once the untouchable tech prodigy, sat pale and trembling, his tailored suit now a mockery of his former swagger. The man who dismissed Sophia as a liability now faced the wreckage of his own arrogance, his empire crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. Sophia felt no joy in Ethan's downfall, only a steely satisfaction. Her baby's kicks, a steady rhythm against her palm, reminded her of the future she was protecting, a life free from Ethan's control. The penthouse in South Beach, once a glittering stage for Ethan's ego, now stood dim and hollow, its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting a man stripped of power. Ethan's signature on the divorce papers was a final, shaky surrender, each stroke of the pen erasing his claim to Sophia and their son. The humor of it struck her faintly. Ethan, who'd once bragged about owning Miami's tech scene, now reduced to a footnote in his own story, outplayed by a woman he'd underestimated and a driver he'd ignored. It was almost comical, like a plot twist in a South Beach soap opera, where the villain's smirk fades to a grimace. Henry's role remained unseen, a puppeteer pulling strings from the shadows. His billionaire status, once a secret hidden behind a chauffeur's cap, had become Sophia's greatest weapon. The financial assault wasn't just about money, it was a message that no one could break a promise to Miguel Alvarez's daughter and walk away unscathed. Sophia, though not present in that conference room, felt the weight of justice settle over her like a warm Miami breeze. She was no longer the discarded wife but a force, her father's legacy and Henry's loyalty forging her into something unstoppable. The city outside buzzed with its usual rhythm salsa beats, ocean waves, but for Sophia, it was the sound of a new chapter opening, one where she held the pen. As Ethan faded into his darkened penthouse, Sophia stood on the cusp of her rebirth, her dreams of the Alvarez Gallery taking shape in Wynwood's vibrant heart. The victory was sweet, but the real triumph lay ahead, in a life built on her terms. What would Sophia create with her newfound freedom, and how would her story inspire the world? Walking away now would mean missing a finale too electrifying to ignore. Under Miami's blazing sun, Sophia Alvarez stood at the threshold of her new life, the vibrant pulse of Wynwood's art district humming around her like a heartbeat. The Alvarez Gallery, a sleek haven of glass and steel, rose amidst the neighborhood's kaleidoscope of murals, its opening night a beacon of her rebirth. Gone was the woman abandoned in the rain, her $2,000 dress a sodden memory of Ethan's betrayal. In her place stood a creator, her eyes alight with purpose, her 8-month pregnant silhouette commanding the room as she welcomed artists and dreamers to a space born from her father's legacy. The gallery's walls, adorned with bold canvases, whispered of resilience, each stroke a defiance of the storm she'd weathered. The night was electric, Miami's art scene buzzing with influencers, collectors, and locals drawn to the gallery's promise. Fairy lights twinkled above, casting a warm glow over sculptures and paintings that told stories of struggle and triumph, much like Sophia's own. Her navy dress, simple yet elegant, hugged her belly, where her son's gentle kicks felt like applause for her courage. She moved through the crowd, her smile a quiet rebellion against the years spent as Ethan's curated trophy. Memories of her father, Miguel Alvarez, flooded back his late-night talks of art's power to heal, his sketches tucked into her childhood books. The gallery was her tribute to him, a space where young artists, like she once was, could paint their futures without fear. In the weeks since Ethan's downfall, Sophia had shed the weight of his control like a snake shedding skin. His empire, once a glittering facade, had crumbled under Henry Langston's financial assault, leaving him a pariah in his South Beach penthouse. The divorce papers, signed in his trembling hand, had severed his claim to her life and her son's as Sophia felt no malice, only a serene satisfaction that justice had prevailed. Henry, her billionaire godfather, remained her silent anchor, his Coral Gables mansion a haven where she planned her future. There, she'd named her son, Lucas Alvarez Langston, a name that wove together her father's passion and Henry's unwavering loyalty. The choice was a quiet nod to the men who'd shaped her, a promise to raise her child in love and freedom. The gallery's opening was more than a launch, it was a declaration. Sophia's vision had transformed a derelict warehouse into a cultural heartbeat, its exposed beams and polished floors a canvas for Miami's creative soul. She'd poured her heart into every detail, from the local artists she championed to the community workshops she planned. The irony wasn't lost on her. Ethan, who'd mocked her love for art as a hobby, would have choked on his overpriced espresso seeing her now, the mistress of a cultural empire he could never touch. It was a delicious twist, like a Miami sunset turning the sky to fire, and she allowed herself a private chuckle at the thought. Sophia's new life unfolded in the mansion's warm embrace, where she and Lucas would build a world of color and possibility. The nursery, painted with soft blues and murals of ocean waves, awaited her son's arrival, a symbol of the freedom she'd fought for. Henry often visited, his eyes crinkling with pride as he watched her grow into her power. The $5.2 billion trust fund was a tool, but Sophia's true strength lay in her courage, forged in the rain and tempered by her father's legacy. Miami's ocean stretched before the mansion, its lapping waves a reminder that storms don't break the strong, they sculpt them. Sophia stood taller, her heart full, knowing she'd found her true self not in wealth but in purpose. As the gallery's crowd toasted her vision, Sophia felt her father's spirit in the laughter, the clinking glasses, the shared dreams. She was no longer defined by Ethan's cruelty, but by her ability to rise, to create, to love. Her story was a testament to resilience, a beacon for anyone who'd ever been underestimated. What would her next chapter hold, and how would it inspire those who heard it? Walking away now would mean missing a story of triumph too radiant to ignore. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe.